And I feel it's rather awesome to be in the company of people who have seen more cases than I will ever see in my entire life. So I can't really speak about homeopathy with any real authority in the face of this audience. And that was a concern for me of some considerable import. When Dr. Sudha sent me an email to say that I would be asked to say something, I always find that a little bit anxious-making. So I can only really speak from that which I know. And just to give you a context, in my practice, because of the nature of my practice, a busy day is if I see 10 people. Because I may see each patient for 2 hours at a time and I see them by myself. And I've just been speaking to a gentleman who will see 200 patients in a day ordinarily, and I dare say that that applies to many of you. It's almost as extraordinary a difference as the homeopathic case-taking and the allopathic pill prescribing. There's two different worlds, maybe. But I reflected when we first spoke this morning about the fact that it was respiratory medicine that brought Dr. Matai and myself together. It was respiratory medicine that began my own healing journey. And I know from my own experience that every great healer, and I suspect that all the physicians here who have made the effort to come at short notice, that each one of them is a great healer. Every great healer will have come through some crisis of their own, because there is no great healer that hasn't been wounded. And if they haven't been wounded, they better go out and get wounded. And my wounding actually started at birth, just before birth. I'm very fortunate in the course of my life in having been able to find complete recollection of that process, and then having been able to put to my mother the entirety of my experience, which shocked her, because she had no idea that this baby coming out could have been so completely aware of her own thinking processes. I now understand that it is no accident that as a child I had problems breathing. And then I was born in Africa, and when I was 6 years old we moved to England, to the United Kingdom, and I developed asthma when we moved to the United Kingdom. Asthma was a very intense and strict school for me, and opened the gateways in my own consciousness to the link between my mind and my body, my perception, and what I was experiencing. And it did two very interesting things in addition. One was it gave me the experience of the subtlety of the energy that came through a homeopathic medicine, and the difference in the nature of the doctor who prescribed homeopathically. And it also gave me the experience of the dramatic miracle of my first ever dose of Ventolin, which I will never forget as long as I live. And to this day, even though I don't have asthma anymore, I never travel without Ventolin. And I'm 53. So the respiratory system has, I realized, as I've been thinking about this presentation, been an anchor throughout my life. And that in itself is no accident. Respiration is about inspiration and expiration. Inspiration has as its root the word spiro, which means both breath and spirit. There is no life to the human body without breath. In every great spiritual tradition, breath is life. There is no life to the spiritual life without meaning. Saukya means, are you well? Are you well in your entirety? Each of us knows that when we are at peace with ourselves, the breath changes. In this country, perhaps more than in most, there is a really deep knowledge and understanding of the fact that it is through the breath that I can gain access to the spiritual realm as a gateway to meditation and a better and deeper understanding of the relationship of myself to the divine and vice versa. So without breath there is no life. Without meaning there is no real spiritual life. Without meaning there is no cause to continue breathing. Those of you who have met me before, and those of you who were here last year when we opened this wonderful enterprise, will know that my passion, what drives me more than anything else, is meaning. For me, homeopathic medicine and the incredible work that you all do is one of the most powerful tools that will help take the human mind, the human consciousness, to a greater understanding of the importance of meaning. It is no accident that in a country that has a 5,000 or more year history of Ayurvedic medicine, a system that was ostensibly, and I say ostensibly because I don't know if it is the ultimate truth, ostensibly born in Germany, has its most powerful root in India, homeopathic medicine. And this country is where it will grow, this country is where it will multiply, this country is the country that will influence the whole of the rest of the world through this system of medicine. Those of you who know me know too that I have written about meaning and that I edit a scientific journal, and amazingly after 17 years I'm still its editor-in-chief in spite of the views that I hold. I want to read something to you from a particular paper that we published 10 years ago, almost 20 years ago in fact, but its root, and what is interesting again, I was reflecting in the development of this work, of this presentation. This particular paper, although born at the moment of my own birth through the experience of not being able to breathe first, and then of being able to take my first breath, which defined my independence just as it defined yours. Because until you take your first breath, you are being breathed for by your mother. Why am I talking about these things? I'm talking about these things because it is that perception, that linking, that does change the way in which you see a case. For me, it is the linking with the origin of breath that influences the way in which I see every case of asthma, every case of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It opens the case of the individual to the universal into which they are born and into which they are suffering. My view is that there is no disease, none, without meaning. But more than that, the disease itself is a healthy state. Now that may seem like an oxymoron, but just put this to yourselves. If you were unable to produce symptoms, how would you ever have the material with which to understand and evolve your consciousness? Now, asthma and respiratory disease, which is the focus of this particular center, and which will be the focus for the evolution of the International Holistic Health Center and the College of Medicine, which will be founded here, and the foundation stone of which we will lay tomorrow, is very interesting as a disease of meaning. So, for those of you who see 200 and more cases a day, those of you for whom asthma is a piece of cake, in a way that it simply isn't for us, I know that all of you homeopaths here can just do 70% of your asthmas in your sleep. I wish you could teach all of those with whom I work. But I want to take that facility and go deeper. Because what happened to me in my course in medicine, and what happened to me when I first presented here in 1989, was that I had an encounter first with the Dalai Lama, then with the import of my scientific work. And as a result, the Dalai Lama asked me to speak in Dharamsala in 1990. I hadn't a clue what I was going to say, just as I didn't this morning. What came when I began to speak to his body of monks and people was that disease is health. But as I began to study that, I realized that the disease of the individual is the disease of the community, is the disease of the culture, is the disease of the nation, is the disease of the planet. And that if all I could see was disease as some kind of negative entity, I was stuck in a downward spiral. But that in fact the disease, the dis-ease, was a call for consciousness to go deeper, to change the physiology, to expand so that it could embrace its community in a different way. I came in 1989 when it took 45 minutes to get from Whitefield to the first beginnings of Salkya on this field. When you were shaken and bumped, it was a completely different environment. When you went to the center of Bangalore, it was easy. There were no traffic jams. Now, when you go to visit the center of Bangalore, it is a nightmare. And everywhere you go, there are fumes. And Bangalore is clean compared with Delhi. You here bring the miracle of your knowledge to treat the diseases that are a consequence of that environment. Now, I'm talking about diseases of meaning. I'm talking about disease as a manifestation of health. How can I possibly say that the thousands of cases of asthma that occur in the center of Bangalore that you are treating are healthy? Well, if we stay at the micro level, of course they're not. Except if we think about the fact that the first breath is the first statement of independence, and we think about the fact that these thousands of people are subjugated to an environmental condition that is the result of a relentless drive, a materialistic mind that wants forever expansion, we begin to understand that there is a different frequency that we need to embrace. So it is a healthy response to a very disordered environment. What I realized that I wanted to share, and the reason why I titled the presentation as I have done, which is to open case-taking to a different level, is to implore you to remember that each case must be seen, felt, and understood within this social, cultural, national, and global context. So it is not just a matter of preparing a homeopathic remedy for a child that can't breathe, or an old person with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or somebody with pneumonia or bronchitis. It is remembering the understanding that this is an individual seeking to overcome the fear that is inherent as a result of the environmental context. But much, much more, it is about remembering that we have, in the best sense of the word, a political context. What we know is that our industrialization, and nowhere is it more radically apparent than in the drive from the airport to this extraordinary haven, that this industrial drive and expansion is unsustainable. What we know is that in an asthmatic crisis, the psychological state that maintains that airway constriction is unsustainable. Now you know as well as I do, remedy or no remedy, that if you sit with somebody in an asthmatic crisis and you bring your presence and your peace to that moment, you can abort the crisis and the breath can re-find itself in its cycle. Dr. Abraham said to me today something which for me is very profound. There's homeopathy, there's all the kind of integrated practice, but greater than all of them is the yoga. Why? Because it takes the mind as the hook to the spirit, to a different level of consciousness and relationship with the body as a whole. So the power of what you... If we don't do something about what is happening industrially and politically, everything that we're doing is ultimately not going to work. And the beauty of homeopathic medicine is that it is impossible to practice it really well without remembering that context. Now, we are here in this incredible environment. I landed at the airport 5 hours ago. I drove in the most amazingly smart, fast car through an extraordinary environment. Some of it impoverished, some of it decrepit, with shacks and beggars beside buildings worth millions, with technology serving the entire planet at the speed of a nanosecond, whilst on the pavement opposite, somebody is scrabbling for a living. Nowhere do I know the experience of such polarity in such proximity. And I arrived here with a fountain, with the smells, with the sounds, with the peace. I began with the origin of the word to inspire, from the word spirit. We have the privilege to be here. In 1989, when I brought my respiratory research, which had opened the gateway for me as a junior doctor and research scientist to the power of the mind in respiration, I met Dr. Matai. In 1989, we had a vision of an international center that could be here, that would serve to give experience, to educate, to research, and to disseminate globally. That's 22 years ago. This weekend will mark another step in that journey. Nowhere better can you experience the juxtaposition of the opposites. Here, you experience the meaning, the divinity in all life that gives vivification to spirit. Here, you can step out and breathe. In the middle of the city, it closes down. If we don't embrace the global context and see our case-taking, our history-taking, our relationship in a global context, ultimately it won't work. It is my vision that from this place, research that has never been done before will begin. And I don't mean laboratory biomolecular research. That will happen, and that will be integral to the process. It has to be. But the research that will define the transformation in education is the research that asks the question, how and why does the process begin? When we can stay really close to that, we can make change in the most extraordinary way. Your homeopathy is the route to that. Because, and I happen to believe that this is intentional, the consciousness of our time cannot comprehend, it does not have a vocabulary for the energetic exchange that happens in a homeopathic prescription. We have no biomolecular context for it. And that is its hope. Because the intensity of the question is so great because there is no biomolecular consequence that people begin to look in a different way. Now, if we act quickly enough in this country, the numbers of cases necessary, the sheer volume of the phenomenon will begin that transformation before the mind is locked in to the next cult of biomolecular medicine. So it's in your hands, guys and girls. It's got to happen. I said last year, and I repeat it again this year, when the work is there and it's the right quality, you can guarantee that I will help you publish it. I have the privilege of editing a journal in which there is a vehicle for it. And I said last year, and I say it again this year, whatever I can do to assist that process, I'm here to do. And it's my privilege to be in your company. I am in awe of what you do.